Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Rich Tomasini with me. Rich is a real estate talent attractor, and one of the things I think you are going to hear about his story is when you can cast a vision for where you want to go and others are willing to go, great things can happen. So, Rich, thanks so much for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Phil. Nice to meet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to start your story, growing up, your dad was an entrepreneur and had a business. So talk a little bit about, being a young man and just being around a business owner and maybe some work ethic that you learn being around dad.
Yeah. Well, generationally, we're like the latchkey guys, right? I'm 40, almost 49 years old. So both parents are working in that generation, right? And my parents went from being employed to self-employed. Um, but more in sort of the light of creating a very good, lucrative job for themselves, but not scaling a business.
Yeah.
My mom worked from home as a medical biller, and my dad worked and had his own residential appraisal firm. So I got exposed to that probably around 10 or 11 to where that was sort of the normal.
Amazing. Now, for you, you didn't necessarily jump into entrepreneurship right away. You went to school, went off to college, and kind of realized, hey, maybe this college thing isn't for me, and ended up deciding to go work with dad. So, talk a little bit about, I always think family dynamics in business can be difficult, right? Like, hey, dad and boss all at the same time. Like, will you respect me as a, fellow worker? Is it, parent son relationship? Is it, owner employee? So, talk a little about, making that trip back home and then, the relationship dynamic there.
Sure. Well, I only started college to appease my parents. So I never felt like it was a good idea for me. And then I proved myself to be right, which is quite lazy. And then, in order to sort of reconcile their disappointment, I ended up working for my dad as a real estate appraiser back in 1999. I got my license. So, the dynamic of working for my dad and sort of under the circumstances of dropping out of college was sort of like, come hang out with me, stupid. So you're not totally ill prepared. So that was sort of the umbrella feeling in the room.
Yeah.
But at that point, I think my ego was so battered to where being in that environment was just the reality and I had to dig my way through it. But my dad was very, very good at training me in an excellent and patient way and treating me as an employee and taking the son father part of it out of it.
Amazing. Now, in the world of appraisals, for many people that have ever purchased a property, it seems like this black box, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
I need it to be worth this dollar amount, and magically it comes out to be right around that dollar amount most of the times. But talk a little bit about just getting introduced to real estate, and I mean, that's a young age. A lot of people, in their teens and early 20s are not competent in real estate. So talk about, some of the things that you end up learning while doing the appraisals.
Well, I mean, it's a 5-year apprenticeship, so you actually get a long window of access to somebody that's got mastery in a place where you clearly don't. Um, it was fine. I'm okay with things that are fine for periods of time. Right? So, like, measured expectation, it was fine. I liked it. I liked being out in the field. I was okay being behind the computer for the minority of the time. Magically, the number of the appraisal comes into the contract price because they share the contract. We were not those kinds of appraisers. We would evaluate the house for what it's worth. Now, keep in mind, if you have like a $950,000 contract and you're coming in at 949, might as well just hit 950 because you can't
Yeah.
prove that it's $1,000 difference. But we really weren't targeted appraisers. We were trying to sort of uncover what the market value of a property was in any given market, any given time. It was very educational in the sense that the principles that you learn from like the Marshall Swift books and all of the academic curriculum out there on how to evaluate property
Yeah.
is oftentimes bypassed when you're selling real estate. You just don't get that back knowledge. So I think one thing that it did for me, while it makes very clear to me that I don't want to be an appraiser forever, it also made it very clear to me that I would have an advantage just in confidence and knowledge entering a sales business with that background. So, you know, the fringe benefit of not totally checking all my boxes was that it gave me a little bit of horsepower in something that could check all my boxes.
I love it. Now, while you're starting, to gain the knowledge in the business, you decide, hey, I can make some side income doing some fix and flip type projects with, my maybe nights and weekend hours. So, talk a bit about getting started in that world. I mean, you hear both sides of it, right? There's people that love it and they say, man, it's helping me make a great amount of income. And then you meet people who they had one or two projects where thought it was gonna be a, quick project, and all of a sudden they're an extra 40 grand into it, and they go, "Never again." So talk a little bit about that for you.
Well, it's a business of variables. So the more variables that you have, the more you have control over the process and the project, and then therefore the more you like it. You'll find the
Yeah.
people that have mastery love it, and the people that don't hate it because the pain
Mm.
is real and you have to pay the
Yeah,
stupid tax.
yeah,
So unfortunately, just like all things that exist there, I was in South Florida at the time. So this was 1999, 2000. 99, I started as a real estate appraiser. I probably didn't have confidence to flip a house until 2000, 2001.
yeah,
And I started the biggest obstacle that I had with flipping houses is who wants to give a 22-year-old kid a loan,
yeah,
right? So, always money was always my greatest obstacle. Now, as far as knowledge and trajectory of the way the market was going and being able to ensure that my margins were good, I was probably a little bit more solid over there. Construction was a whole nother industry and arena that I had to get knowledgeable about. So that was another big variable. But I ended up buying and selling about $30 million of real estate in my 20s in Florida, paying stupid, crazy rates, doing all kinds of different things, but figuring it out. And for anybody who's in that space or just getting started, it's awesome. I mean, it's not as good as the stock market because the stock market, you can make money while you can bet against the market, and you can bet on the market, and you can use puts and options and all kinds of different things to play. In real estate, when the market goes down, it's sort of it's a unfriendly cycle. It's like coming down the mountain with no oxygen.
yeah,
So you have to really time it out. And I think it's more of like push seasons where you might have a 6 or 7 year push season where you're pushing really hard, then you
yeah,
liquidate, and then you got to be really, really kind of prudent. And then when it hits near the bottom, you reinvest and try to double up. So anyway, so I don't like that sort of unilateral way of making money where
yeah,
a good market is the wind at your back and a bad market makes it really hard.
yeah.
But that was just a personal observation. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, as you're enjoying your time in Florida, an opportunity or maybe a calling comes and it's time to move Florida and head north to North Carolina, or the Carolinas. So talk a bit about, what led to that transition and why Charlotte?
Well, when you're a real estate appraiser, you're not allowed to make time adjustments because some underwriter in Iowa that's never been involved in the evaluation of a property says you can't do that, right? But we
Yeah.
used to use this technique called the successive sales method, where we'd be able to track what houses are doing in a good market or whether they're doing in a bad market or if it's just stable. It was one of the check boxes had on the USPAP grid, right? So what happened to me is I started seeing inventory build up, and keep in mind, I'm playing in the playground of flipping houses,
Right.
and
Right.
I felt like things were constricting. So in 2004, I said to my dad, I go, I think the market's crashing. And my dad had less knowledge than I did, despite the fact that he had far greater wisdom, because I
Mm,
was doing so many of the appraisals and he was reviewing my work where he
yeah.
wasn't really deriving the adjustments, but making sure that I was making less errors.
Yeah.
So I started to logically say, look, I think that we're headed toward like a tsunami. So I sold everything I had because I was sure that the data was teaching me something, and convinced my parents that unless we're going to be here for a long period of time, let's get out, right? Because none of us were in love with the heat or the traffic or the congestion or, the
Yeah.
third world or South Florida, right? Even though I love third world countries and I travel to them, I don't want to live in one, right? So anyway, so the Carolinas were a good option for us, and Charlotte seemed like it, when I was looking at their market, that they were still not experiencing that ripple of what we were seeing in the industry. But then it happened in Charlotte, like in 2007, 8 anyway. but we did extend for 2 years and brace ourselves better. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, at some point, at this point in time, are you married?
Oh, yeah, so,
When
I've
you
been
make the transition from Florida to
oh,
Charlotte?
no, I'm
Nope.
single. I hadn't met
Okay.
my wife until 2013.
Okay.
So
We'll
that's
tie that in here.
2005. Yeah,
We'll tie that in a few years. All right, perfect. So you're in Charlotte now, and the housing crisis is essentially starting, right? It's
yeah,
2008, 2009 timeframe. But in 2007, you decided to get real estate license and think about doing some different, um, we'll say, creative ways of selling homes. And so, talk a bit about learning that new style, but then also, something you mentioned, in different interviews you've done is really, although you knew the style really well, you had to teach the people that were going to potentially be clients of yours that
yeah,
style as well. So, talk a bit
yeah.
about those two elements of it.
Well, the way that we always saw realtors in the appraisal business is somebody who knows nothing gets paid the most. Like, that's how it was defined in the office space,
Which
okay?
sometimes is the case, right? I mean, that
The industry didn't earn that, perception for no reason. So anyway, um, I didn't wanna be a realtor even though officially I was a realtor because I was part of the National Association of Realtors.
yeah.
I wanted to be a consultant or an advisor. So my style, became very quickly, well, I had a prospect because I had very little budget that I didn't know where to spend money to advertise as a real estate agent, right?
Mm, yeah.
So I just started prospecting through the white pages because this is like late 2006, 2007, and the internet's still more Al Gore-ish than it is, Sam Alston, right?
Yeah, right.
So so I started to prospect, and the way that I prospected, because I had no sales skills, was really simple. I would just be like, "Hey, Phil, my name is Rich Tomasini. I'm a former real estate appraiser, so I kind of look at evaluating property quite differently than maybe other people you've spoken with. And I am pricing out properties here in Mooresville to get practice because I just moved here a couple of months ago. Would you
Mm,
mind if I use your house as a candidate and then I'll share the details?" And I did, and that allowed me to be face to face, and then my ability to be responsible allowed me to make a consistent, decent impression, and I would follow up, and I started to take listings over, both by sellers that were actively selling on their own, people that had expired where they took a shot at it and it didn't work, and for people that were just random because I was practicing doing appraisals on people's
yeah.
houses, and every single person was a candidate.
Yeah.
So that's all I did for the first year, and then I took on like 70 listings. I was working at Remax at the time, and I started to have to build a team before I had any mastery. Like, I'm a
Mm,
terrible manager. I'm still a terrible manager, Phil. I'm barely a technician and I'm hardly an entrepreneur, but I'm a lead generating machine because I'm so anxious and paranoid that I'm calling and I'm going on the
mm,
offense early.
yeah.
So I ended up scaling a team, and then the market crashed and we had like all this inventory and no buyer base. And so we just started to pivot.
Yeah. Now, let's highlight a little bit on, team building, and we'll talk more about this as we go. But I think for a lot of people, and you said it well earlier, your parents were working for themselves, not necessarily scaling or growing a business. And then, it takes hiring different talent and different people to grow a business, right? So there's maybe revenue being generated even though Rich is on vacation for a week, right? Opposed to, well, if Rich isn't doing the job, then
Let's get
it's
done.
just a cost to the business, right? So for you, as you were looking to scale and grow, I know you said, "Hey, this maybe wasn't my perfect timing of doing it," but what did you focus on? Are you a person that says, "Hey, here's maybe my two or three weaknesses. Let's hire people to fill those gaps"? Were you someone that said, "Hey, I want to run with somebody like me, so I will hire, a like-minded person and try and grow that way"? Or how did you scale and grow?
Yeah. So neither. I didn't take an intellectual approach to it, saying that here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, let me fill in the weaknesses. That's something
Yeah.
I do. If there was only two or three weaknesses, I would have been in much better shape than I was at the time. And then the other thing is I'm a lone wolf. I don't like running partners because most are not going to keep up with me. At least at that time, people probably
Yeah.
pass me, right? But at that time, I was sprinting for long distances. Um, so my approach was sort of, I realized that, look, we're in sales and nobody likes the sales part. They all like the relationship part with the client, the advisor part through the process, and some like the staging and marketing, some like other things, but nobody really likes to lead generate. And I realized that if I was not a hobbyist in the lead generation side, I could dominate and make better decisions from there because I'd be filling the biggest void, which is
Yep.
where's all the business to? I have too much business. That was the
Yep.
biggest tilt I was trying to get into. So once I realized that the right direction was to get all of the business that I can get firsthand, then I started to go fast. And that's when I prospected. And then I had to solve problems that were byproducts of those habits, which is okay, I can't handle the business. So now I have a photographer, I have an assistant, I have a buyer's agent that shows property because I'm not even showing property anymore. I have
Yeah.
other listing assistants that can help me so I can lead generate. And I think what a lot of people do is they end up like building an ISA, like an internal sales agency within their company because everybody gets burnt out on the recruit on the prospecting. At some point, you're making six, $700,000, and somebody's telling you to go to hell, right? And it's like, oh my God, I'm too good for this, but you're really
Yeah.
not. That's what you're
Yeah.
good at. So I just became resolute that like, okay, I'm not going to love this part of it, but I probably should do this for a while, and I did. And honestly, that's the part of of every business that probably, in my opinion, gets too anemic quickly. Is there's nothing to paperclip or staple if the sales team is asleep at the wheel.
Yeah. Bingo. So let's talk a little bit about that. Lead generation and, every business. So, the listeners, you might not be in real estate, but every business has a need for lead generation. And I think there's, oftentimes for the person listening right now that's just getting started, there's the discomfort of getting your name out there. In your world, it's oftentimes a lot easier to be from an area, so you kind of have a warm market and help sell. Well, you decided to move, a few states north, so that that probably wasn't part of your world, but you're willing to do the uncommon thing and go, hey, stranger, can I, give you an appraisal? So today, someone's listening right now and they're starting their sales funnel. What's your encouragement just on the mindset that they can have? And maybe one or two practical steps to really grow and start, getting the engine running.
Okay, so like I think you have to go on the offense right out of the gate because, like, I don't know about you, Phil, but like, I start every morning around an 8 or a 9 or a 10, and then at 7 o'clock, I'm a lower number, right? So, like, I want to operate at that frequency. So that's when I want to do my work. So I try to go on the offense just in case I get sidetracked or I have a bad day or I psych myself out. I did the hard things first,
Yep,
right?
it's good.
The second of all, the second piece of it, especially with prospecting, is I need to have some self-esteem here because other people are going to not create the best um uh uh impression of myself by the things that people say when they're annoyed when you're trying to sell to them,
Yeah,
right? So I really tried to like just be courageous and tough for 5 minutes at a time. And I was never like really good for an hour, but sometimes I could do it 12 times for 5 minutes a pop,
it's good.
sometimes, right?
Yeah,
And then the other part is like, and this is something that I'm like more like just prescribing or diagnosing myself after the fact, so it's not quite fair. But like, if you would have inverted my problems, you would have said, these are the things that you can do to go out of business. Don't meet new people, don't build relationships, don't go out there and prospect, right? So like
yeah,
I wanted to make sure that at the very least, if I failed, those three or four things that you should not do were not part of my daily habits.
it's good. Now, what about the person that is in kind of the next season of, sales or a business? And that is, hey, I've been doing this for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm I'm maybe not trying to hunt after every single possible deal. I don't want to sell the $160,000 house. I want to be more
Yeah.
strategic and around. the 600,000 above house every day, or whatever the number is. But, that type of a business or salesperson, what's, something you've seen to be practical and effective in kind of that scaling up, or, tier advancing?
Yeah, well, I mean, so one thing, in order to scale and have people follow you, I think leading by example and really outperforming is sort of something that you shouldn't bypass. We see a lot of people bypass that. Um, because then your personal development and experience from what you did is valuable and you can hopefully minimize the brain damage for other people that want to do what you just did. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it. Second of all, is like basically, if you took a notepad and you just put a vertical line down the middle, there's things that somebody can do for me for $50 an hour, and there's things that only I can do. And that's obviously the shorter list. But only
Yeah.
I could do this podcast. Nobody
Yep.
can fill in for me, right? Only
Right.
I can build a relationship with you, Phil, because getting to know somebody else doesn't make me get to know you better, right?
Yeah.
So I really stayed in a very small bubble of things that only I could do. And what I realized is everything else could be outsourced and could be a business. So I did that. And then at some point, that requires you upping your price range to luxury or land and ranch or commercial or whatever, right? At some point, you find your niche. I like dealing with investors because I know how to talk cap rates and land conservancies and defined benefit groups and bonus depreciation and all the big things, right? Like I could see how we can skin this buffalo and use all the parts, right?
Right.
But whatever it ends up being through your actual battlefield experience, you can start outsourcing other things. And then what you finally realize, I think, when it starts to graduate or galvanize, is really you do nothing related to tasks except project management. Is the lead generation anemic? Is operations working well? Do we have the right people that are talented and don't have commission breath involved? Is
Yeah.
are we preemptive? Are we staying in front of things? Do we have a niche? Are we different? Are we filling our mission statement, whatever that is? But really the paramount to all things is having enough good relationships with high caliber people. And what I realized doing sales, which is a low caliber business, if not approached properly,
Yeah.
is that the 75 or 100 cards that I hand wrote out to specific clients was a was basically the catalyst of a 40-50 million dollar solo sales career,
Yep.
right? Key people. And if I wanted to make my sales career 200 million, I just needed another 25 high caliber relationships.
Yeah.
So that is ultimately the graduation, right? Which is comes with wealth building and power, and you hear all these billionaires. I just read a book about a billionaire, and it's like it's all relationship. Like there gets to a certain point where Phil, you could call me up and say, Rich, I need an open mind, 10 minutes of your time on next Friday, and there is no investigation. Like, okay,
Right.
right? And the
Yep.
more you can be in those situations and build that, which takes time and credibility and performance and all that stuff, um, things start to shift and move much more fluidly, and you make a
Yeah.
lot.
Amazing. Now, talking about shifting and moving, so you get married 2013, but then also not too far after that, you end up transitioning into a new brokerage firm and heading to a different company. So, talk a little bit about that season of life. Going from single to married, but then also a little bit of the career switch not too long after.
So, like, let's just say within a few years, around 40, got married, shifted broker, which I was not a real hopper of brokerages, and had my first son. So, like, change was in the air for sure.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was I was at a little sort of like a little big startup, a company called EXP Realty, which was this virtual real estate company pre-COVID, not an easy sell. And there was about 3,700 agents at the company, and probably 3,000 of them were cab drivers, right? So like, but they had a platform that solved all scale and compounding problems that I was having. So I was sort of in that typical like a rat race of training future competitors on teams because the margin I'm making off them is at the expense of their opportunity. And the only way for them to graduate is to break up with me. And I felt that breakup happen many times. And I was happy for them, but I was also remiss that I lost somebody that I enjoyed working with, right?
Yeah.
Or scaling an independent brokerage. And If you can't drive to the office, that's where your business ends, right? So,
Yeah,
like,
right.
all of these are very stupid things. And this platform, despite the calamity of how they were operating as a brokerage, solve all the problems if we could just get our act together. And so I came over in 2017 and I started to build EXP in my Charlotte market, which was like maybe 15,000 agents or so.
Yeah,
And we went from like ranked 47 to ranked number one. And we did $5 billion of sales within 2 or 3 years up and going. And all I did was hit on all the high frequency people, right? Because I was a high frequency performer. I don't know if I was a high frequency person, but just in the narrow vision of how I showed up professionally, I was high caliber, right?
yeah,
So I started to bring people over and then I started to kind of hone them on the blind spots that they had in their business, which sometimes was marketing or SEO or relationships or follow up or contact managers or phrasing of words or misuse of time or all these different types of things. And if I didn't have the answer for them, I started to play Cupid and pair them with somebody who was really good at that. And we built a real collaborative system and we started to scale. So I came from in 2017 in Q4 when I joined EXP, it was a agency of one in my
yeah.
world, right? And then we grew to at the current time we have 3,100 agents. We opened up the UK. We're in all these multiple markets. I think I'm in 18 countries right now, give or take. I haven't checked in the last quarter, and it's scaled, and it's everybody gets access to me at no cost, which was the anti old model, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway, so that's what we worked on, but it's basically all the same things. It's like, instead of the target is your consumer, which is your seller or your buyer, the target now is the agent. And who knows agents' problems better than high performing agents?
absolutely.
Yeah. So like if I'm a criminal and I go to prison, I should understand the culture much better than somebody who's not a criminal. Right.
Yeah. Well, so for you, as you're, kind of transitioning from maybe, focus being selling the real estate to more, creating and matching, the right realtor with the opportunity at EXP. Talk a little bit about that for you. I mean, I think sometimes people leave one type of sales and recognize, man, I'm not very good at the other type of sales, or they leave sales and they get into more of like a leadership management. And because they were good at sales, people thought they would be really good at leading and managing. And oftentimes you couldn't have a further from the truth
Yeah.
dynamic. So talk a little bit about those two different elements for you.
Well, so like if you ever read the book The E Myth, it goes from technician
Uh,
to manager to the entrepreneur, right?
yep.
And I knew Phil that I was an awful manager. And you might be able to get me from an F to a D, but we're not putting me next to any solid C's or above, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So EXP was going to manage for me. And that was great because I needed to outsource that to not disappoint mass groups of people.
Hmm.
Um, so I could spend all my time being a technician and an entrepreneur. And then if I if I build an organization, then I can spend all my time as an entrepreneur. And then as an entrepreneur, I can spend my time developing my leadership skills and training with John Maxwell and getting coaches and learning and sourcing myself. And then for free, I can regurgitate it to my people and take away the wins and start to become more dynamic, but not quietly. Share whatever was making me more dynamic so they could be more dynamic. And it started to grow. And, I didn't end up being that desk cop that was good in the field because the desk cop was EXP, right? So I could go into being a sergeant, which made great field agents, which is what I was. I was a great field agent, right? Now as a sergeant, I'm supervising, I'm coming in on the calls, I'm helping other field agents do better, right? Make less
Yeah.
mistakes, compress their careers, build wealth. We go into all kinds of wealth building far beyond commissions. That's not really wealth building, that's a job, right? So anyway, and so that worked out right well. But like I think that really you could put anybody that's doing three major things in any business and they'll succeed. Is one is are they fighting on their front foot? Are they going to go out there and build relationships?
Yep.
Two, are they going to track and nurture those relationships and not just look for one night stands, but actually build something consistent long term, right? And
Yep.
three, are they competent and ethical in their dealings? Like, are you going to be dependable? Like, so if I ever introduce you to somebody, Phil, like the whole thing that you should be able to trust is that I have filtered them and they're competent and ethical. Now, you might not like them, but we could take
Yeah.
those other two things off the table, right? So, and I think that transcends. So, like, I never really had look, I have a private money business. I have investments in the market, mostly the international market. I have title companies and JV mortgage companies and private loans out on the street. They all are the same thing. They all have that same common denominator is being ethical and competent,
Yep.
serving other people's needs, and being good at building relationships, and then seeking out new opportunities and always being open minded there. I think that's all you need. The rest is more stylistic.
Yeah. Now, you break it down so eloquently with those three very succinct points. However, there are, like you said, business coaches across the world trying to help people just get through those 3 points. So for you, as you've been, getting coached and doing coaching with, the likes of John Maxwell and different folks, what has been like one or two tangible items that have been a game changer that you're sharing with, your team these days that you rewind the clock, you say, I wish I would have known that sooner?
Um, well, okay. When it comes to a timeline, definitely don't trade time for money because you're going to lose that trade.
Yeah.
Okay. You always want to get paid residually, even if it's not passively residual.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Number two, you have to either invent something pretty wild or you have to sell someone else's great idea. I realized that I was in camp two, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
like I had sobriety around that early on. That was helpful. Right. Um, I think coaches are really good at extracting and pulling things out of you, where I'm more of an advisor, where I'm good at telling you what to do.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
probably prefer the latter if I were to just check the boxes where I was talented. Um, One of the things that I think I think I came to a realization on my own, and maybe this is relatable to somebody listening to this, is I I only like when faced with all of the things that you can do, always take the hardest decision,
Mm.
always the right one. And then when you're in a hard situation, you just got to be tough for a few minutes at a time. Like
Yeah.
I can get one person to tell me to go to wherever
Yeah.
and make that call. And then
Yep.
that's more than I did the day before. So like, while that was an unsuccessful day, I was very successful and I took one swing.
Yep.
Now tomorrow, can I take two swings? Where you get a lot of people are like, I want to lose 20 pounds in a month. Well, now you got to be miserable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I was more just kind of in the mentality where, okay, I'll just walk an extra 1,000 steps and then next month an extra 5,000, you know? So I was just tough for like a couple minutes at a time doing things that I feared and hated. And then
Yeah.
at some point, even if you hate doing things, like I don't know how you feel, but like I don't love shaving or like combing my hair or putting socks on,
Yeah.
right? But I'm really good at, well, obviously combing my hair, I'm not that good at, but I'm really good at putting socks on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I hate it, but I'm really good at it. And then what I started to realize about myself, which is probably like a narcissistic trait for sure, is that I love being good at things.
Mm. Yeah.
If I get really good at something, I actually like being good at things, even if it's something I don't like doing. Right. So
Yeah.
like now, like I mop my garage all the time. I don't really like mopping my garage. I do a really good job at it. I'm thorough. I'm methodical. I try to listen to a podcast while I'm doing it. I really try to just be in the moment. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's how it worked for me specifically. Would that work for someone else? I don't know. Like, do you have to be in a ton of pain in order to get out of your comfort zone? Or can you preemptively say, pain is coming if I don't do these things, and then put yourself in those moments voluntarily
Yeah.
before the other shoe drops?
That's yeah, that's great. And I think, to that point, you just don't know, right? I mean, it's the age-old lesson of the kid with, touching the hot stove, right? Some kids you can tell them, hey, stove's hot, don't need to touch it.
Yeah.
And they say, all right, I got no interest touching that. And you got other kids
Yeah.
where it's almost like a magnet, right? It now means I have to go touch that. And then they figure out that the stove is hot and, they deal with the consequences of the decision. So I think that's great.
Yeah. I'm that kid, Phil.
Well, but are your kids those kids?
No, one is and one isn't.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure that's fun to be able to parent to both styles then.
Yeah, it's awesome. All the my son that's a lot like me challenges me to challenge him because being a lot like me is not always just a good thing, right? And then my son who is not like me, I want to embrace that, but there's some things that I do that I want him to be able to do, right? So it's like constantly a tightrope between influencing and knowing when not to influence and not be the example, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, as you know, size and scale continues, I think oftentimes then there becomes the next level of increased expectations. Hey, if it were well, Rich has only brought over, 6 or 7 people, then next year they might say, "Well, we want you to get to 10." Well, then once you get to 10, usually the expectation
Yeah.
is, "All right, I wanna get to 14." So, for you, as, size and scale has increased, how have you been able to kind of manage and move along on those expectations, that either they have for you or you have for yourself, right? I mean, as a high capacity person, we oftentimes are moving our own goalpost, without anyone else's help.
Yeah, 100%. There's 2 books that I read on this, exact topic. I'll tell you the second one because when I do audibles, I don't remember the title name as much. Um, there was a book I just finished called Never Enough by Andrew Wilkinson, and then Die with Zero. Those are the 2 books that I kinda leaned on
Yeah,
during those awkward phases of when to keep going and when to stop.
yeah,
So my company doesn't, well, I wouldn't say they don't care, but they don't put any pressure on me because every time my organization sells about $10 billion of sales, they pay me X amount of money. So their safe word is more,
yeah, right,
right?
right.
Okay, so fine, that's great, but they're not ever upset that they're making $10 billion of sales with me.
Yeah,
It's like they never have that attitude. So that's, I don't really worry about them because that's their job, right? Like you do me a favor, you worry about you, Phil, I'll worry about me, and then if we're in a jam where we have to worry about each other, we will.
yeah,
So one of the things is like for me, it's finding the right number. And you hear a lot of financial advisors talk about this, the 4% rule, the rule of 55 of pulling out things, pre-tax money, post-tax money. What's the right number at 50 years old? Is 5 million the right number? Is it 7 million? What's your expenses? How long are you going to fund? What's the market going to do? So you could play with all these softwares out there, which there are so many right now, and all roads will lead you to some percentage of safety. Oh, great, I'm a 94 with a green circle around it, or I'm not, right? So for me, like I had to really establish that because like all families are different. And like my family's very earth, but it's not the cheapest family that
mm,
I've ever seen.
yeah,
Right. So my fault too, by the way. So, like, for me, it's and then my wife is 10 years younger than me. Don't judge me, not by design. It was a blind date. They lied about her age. I just found her to be very, very smart and alluring. And then, so I'm planning for a 39-year-old, right? Not a
yeah,
49-year-old, right? Because
yeah,
her life expectancy with technology could be 100. And then
right,
I've got almost 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, right? So like what's the legacy we're giving them and do we wait till we die to give it? Like there's a lot of moving parts and we're all in a different
absolutely.
timeline, right? So for me personally, at what our lifestyle is. And by the way, like we live in a very nice home. We take very good vacations, but I don't have any Lamborghinis. This is a Tudor, not a Submariner. Like we're not huge spenders, but we like experiencing as much as we can. And we have a nice home because we spend a lot of time here. And that's just justifying it because we don't need it. Okay. But the whole point is like for me, where I'm at, being diversified in the stock market, in real estate, getting my tax loopholes through the real estate IRS legislations there, having private money, which is short term and recycles fast, having other drips of money that are not contingent upon the real estate market, having a rental portfolio with multi units. All of these pieces together gave me the diversity to survive crashes. I'm not a Bitcoin guy. I didn't lose anything in Bitcoin, right? I didn't make anything in Bitcoin either because there was a lot of
Yeah,
people made fun, right? So,
yeah,
so anyway, I went to public school, so I still don't understand it. I can't invest in things I don't understand. Okay.
yeah,
So I'm trying to understand that. But the whole point is like $10 million, if we can't earn back, I would say on the 4% rule, which I think is total garbage, by the way. But if we can't live on 400 grand, then I need to work longer. But I believe that we could live on a fraction of that. So
Yep.
once you hit $10 million, at that point, if you're not living on the yield and you're still generating income, we can double every 6, 7, 8 years. And then I can, in my living trust, I can sort of earmark smart times to reward my kids while hopefully I'm alive, but now while they're premature to make bad decisions for themselves. Right. So
Yep.
the way that we try to like sort of jujitsu that entire moving piece in my mind is anything after $10 million in net worth is because you love doing what you're doing or you're helping other people, but you're probably, for our family and our values, trading time for money at that point.
Yeah. That's really good.
That was
Yeah,
a
the
very
diamond.
verbose answer, but like that's the Rubik's Cube that I've been doing the last 8 years.
I love it. Well, yeah, the Die with Zero book is certainly in that. I'll have to read the Never Enough. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
It's not as good as the Die with Zero, but when once you've gone through the achievement phase and you're trying to feel fulfillment and you realize that money doesn't fulfill you at all, then
Yeah,
that other book is good for that phase.
that's so good. I love it. Yeah. Achievement and fulfillment, those are interchangeable and oftentimes misunderstood, right?
Yeah, well, they're interchangeable, and that's the error.
Yeah.
Like if you interchange those two words, you're either a unicorn or you're making a terrible mistake.
Yep.
Now, some people are unicorns. Like, for example, I watch this guy, Teddy Baldassar, who's a watch guy on YouTube,
Yeah.
right? And man, dude, this guy loves watches and he's a watch nerd, right?
Yeah.
And he retail store. I'm sure he monetizes YouTube and social media platforms and advertisers and the whole gamut. That guy is achieving and fulfilling at the same exact time.
Yeah.
But if you're not like the lead singer of the best band you ever loved, right, you might be achieving more than fulfilling.
Mm, that's so good. I love it. Well, Rich, I want to say thanks so much for being on today. But before we, end it, I would just ask, is there any one or two, pivotal moments in your journey that really stand out to you of, you know, things that we didn't highlight that, you want to make sure we just touch base on?
Yeah, I guess okay, two things that I would think about. One is just try to be valuable. Like invest in your own education, read. Everything's free now. There's laziness is the only justifiable answer to why don't you know more or show up better, right?
Yeah.
All there
Yeah.
free. Everybody who's successful offers everything. You know how many successful people I've had tell me the same exact thing, which is I'll share everything. Nobody's going to do it anyway. Right. So totally free. Right. So like be valuable to other people because I think that is something like, can you think of one valuable person that you have in your life right now?
Yes.
Chances are that person is a long distance run with you and you'll probably do anything for that person. Right.
Yep.
Like within your standards. Right. And then the second part is like you got to be motivated, but motivation in of itself is such a short-lived thing. That's why the gyms are empty again already, right? Like motivation doesn't last very long. So like you have to figure out a way to trick or program or roll your mind into being disciplined. And discipline ties way better for me. I don't know, like I have armchair therapy here. I have no idea if what I'm saying is against all of Freud's work. Okay. But like for me, having a reason of why I want to push allows me to create disciplines in which I can get much further ahead than just being motivated, you
Yep.
know? Like if I want a nice watch or a 1970 Chevelle, it's easy. I can work my butt off for a quarter or a week or a day or just take a 1 hour consultation call. Depends on what your hourly worth is. And I can
Right.
solve for that. That's easy. But
Yep.
like if I want to donate $500 million to Huntington's disease, that's a whole nother thing.
Yep.
And that will allow me to work for a long period of time. Right.
That's good.
So anyway,
Yeah.
so I think getting kind of clear, like in what's the game plan is
Yeah.
something that we sometimes sort of like revisit after we're in the middle of the plan.
That's good. Well, and that reminds me of one kind of concept that you know, talk a lot about with the people that you're helping and training and, you know, growing is, you know, you want to train them in such a way that they are equipped
Yes.
exceedingly well, but also knowing that if I equip you to be amazing at what you do, there's a chance you leave me, right? And I think sometimes that fear for people is where they will withhold that last 20%, right? It's like, well, you know, and it could be a leader that doesn't want the salesperson to outperform them as the leader. It could be, you know, the person running the company that loves the employee so much that if I give them, you know, just that extra little bit, then they might have the confidence or the last little bit of knowledge they need to go do it themselves. So talk about getting to that place where you're comfortable with that. Hey, my
So
goal
easy.
is to help somebody.
Yeah, it's so easy, Phil. I'm religious.
Hmm, love it.
Yeah, it's all solved there. Like, no offense to atheists or anybody who doesn't believe, but like if you do believe or you land in a place where you believe at some point, it's already clearly spelled out. There's no decision to make.
That's right.
Also, scarcity mindset makes a lot of millionaires out of billionaires.
Mm,
I don't believe in being too risk adverse or and then the other part of it is always like a common sense vein in it. Like it's like grandma's recipe, right? Like I'll show you how to make 80% of the recipe, but her secret ingredient you don't get to
yeah.
see. And the way I think about like my grandmother would be if I could tell my grandmother like 50 years after her death that 3,000 people are eating her soup and they love it. They've
Yep.
even they've even plagiarized and told their family members it's their soup recipe. It's so good they stole the identity of it. Would you rather feed 5,000 people or just me?
That's good, man.
You probably say, Rich, I hope 5,000 people eat my soup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't really worry about that. It's not mine. It's not mine. I worry about things that I don't know the answer on.
It's good. I love it. Well, Rich, I want to say thanks again so much for being on today, my man, and excited for all the things that you will continue to do. And you know, when you're at 7,000, we'll probably be doing this again, and you know, highlighting, hey, how the heck you go from 3,000 to 7,000? And I'm very excited for it.
If I hit 7,000, you should be interviewing the person that made that happen for me because that will be far more interesting. And I'll direct them to you, Phil. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
we'll do
Yeah.
it both.
Okay. That's cool. I'm in. Have a great day.